Hello and welcome to another episode of the CEO Pick. I am Dave Osh, and the CEO Pick show selects CEOs who lead teams that individually and collectively build the capacity and capability to create outcomes that matter most for the organization and the society. Such a leader is our guest today, Sanjeev Kumar, the CEO of Skience, a digital transformation platform for broker dealers and registered investment advisors that provides wealth managers with an efficient way to unify their technology and increase their productivity. Sanjeev founded Skience in 2001 with $400. Lots of patience, determination, and passion for leveraging technology to solve business problems. Without boring or getting investors on board, he and his team has grown the company to more than 200 employees with offices in Herndon, Virginia and Bangalore, India. Sanjeev's like hiking and biking, and he also participates in fundraising bike rides each year to sponsor education for children who will not have the funds to go to school otherwise. Hello, Sanjeev, and welcome to the show.
Hello, Dave. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm happy to be here. Excited to be talking about who I am, what our organization is all about. Just one correction based on how you introduced me. We did start small. We had very humble beginnings, and we grew thanks to the wonderful team that Science has had over the years. However, we did take in investments about 2 years ago. So yes, we did grow about 18 years almost 18 years without any external investments, but we did take investments from four different really good partners, and we are on the next level of our growth path at this point.
Congrats, Sanjeev.
Thank you.
And so, what are the lessons that you learned during your 20 years journey to grow the company from where you started to 200 employees?
Well, there are a lot of lessons. When you run a company, when you grow a company, you learn a lot, business-wise and also personality-wise. Things change. I think, again, I'll go back to what I said just now. I've had the privilege of working with amazing individuals, amazing team members at Science that have persevered. So I think if I were to say one big lesson or one big characteristic that we have developed as an organization in the last 20 years is grit. We take pride in that specific characteristic. We've gone through quite a bit. We started small, as you pointed out. We started with minimal investments and very humble beginnings. We started by leveraging our strengths and our network. And we delivered results that led to additional business referrals, word of mouth referrals, our clients introducing us to their acquaintances and their network. We started in the middle of what was then a technology bust, our recession, and then we went through the financial recession in the 2008 timeframe. So all through that, we kept growing and we kept keeping our head down and gritting it out. So I would say the biggest lesson that we've learned is to not give up and find ways to reinvent ourselves when needed and stay relevant.
Yeah, so grit and reinvent yourself. Since last time we talked, you mentioned your partnership with Salesforce, and I understood that partnership is like just beyond anecdotal experience with one company. So would you mind to share about your philosophy about partnerships?
I think partnerships are extremely important in today's business world. One company cannot do it itself. You look at successful organizations, be it an Apple or a Google or Salesforce, one characteristic of these organizations is the ecosystem that they have created. Not just trying to do everything themselves, but building a network of alliances, partners, companies ranging from very large organizations to smaller players that build and innovate and offer extensions of capabilities to the products and features that these companies provide. So we approached alliances in a very sincere fashion. We were fortunate enough to be approached by one of our first partners back in 2005-ish. That led to a number of opportunities. It was that classic but cliched 1+1=3 situation. But we benefited. It was a larger company, and they opened up a lot of doors for us that led to additional business for our organization and growth. And we've added other partners. We've re-strategized some of the relationships that we've had, depending on how we've grown and the areas of business that we've gotten into. But one theme has remained constant, I would say, in the last 15 years or so, and that's being focused on alliances. Salesforce is a great partner for us. Aligning with Salesforce, working with them, introducing our product capabilities on Salesforce's platform as well has led to a lot of opportunities and growth for my company, our team. Continue to focus on relationships, partnerships, whether it is technology platforms or business organizations where there is synergy. But that's a big part of our growth strategy.
Yeah. So let's switch gears to what's going on now in the world, to the world of COVID-19. How did you deal with a higher complexity in the ecosystem, as you mentioned?
First of all, the pandemic has been extremely unfortunate, right? I mean, you feel especially for those that are vulnerable in terms of health or in terms of finance that have been hurt in multiple ways because of the pandemic. For a minute, if you leave the tragic nature of this pandemic aside, it has also been fascinating to see the way things are transitioning, the way things are changing around us, right? We see that the way people work, the way people travel, the way people are where they want to live, their buying patterns, how they live. I mean, human behavior has changed in the last 6 months, I would say. Astonishingly, the pace of change has also been tremendous. If you had asked, let's say, a large organization's chief technology officer or chief information officer to come up with a plan to support 100% of its workforce to be remote, the result would have been ideally a multi-year plan, right? But without such a plan, a lot of organizations accomplished that in less than 3 months, right? So it goes to prove that when we are left to our own preferences, we find the easier options. But when forced by something that is inevitable, we think, we work unconventionally, we achieve results that were perhaps considered not so much possible under normal circumstances. I think when you talk about the ecosystem, and when I say the ecosystem, it's not just the partners, but also our clients and the industry that we work in. The pandemic has also opened up opportunities. Yes, companies took time to understand what was happening. There was a kind of a pause, just companies trying to understand where this was headed, what's the total impact of this pandemic, when things might improve, etc. But there are also attempts to recover from it in the recent months. And I think it has opened up a lot of opportunities for organizations that focus on leveraging technology in innovative ways. On one hand, you have companies in the and let's say travel and transportation or hospitality industry that are hurting, that are suffering big time. And on the other hand, you have companies like, let's say, Zoom Communications or Instacart that are just soaring. I mean, you can argue that some of this is because of being in the right place at the right time. There were products that had been built that were not relevant previously, but because of the pandemic, they're all of a sudden very relevant. There are also examples of companies that pivoted because of a forward-thinking vision, and they executed with agility. And I'll go back to one of the topics that I think we both are interested in, which is organizational agility or the speed of execution. And these companies did that. They had a forward thinking vision. They came up with that execution plan with agility and came up with solutions to help individuals and businesses in the current or let's say post COVID world. So these organizations are successful because they attempted to figure out relevancy, right? They looked at what were they doing, was it relevant, and even if it was relevant, how can they improve upon that? And again, execute with the right sense of urgency. That was equally important. I mean, I can give you an example of our partner Salesforce. They've been the most successful CRM company or the platform in the world, but they came up with work.com. to address a lot of the COVID specific requirements in the world and post COVID specific requirements in the working world as well. Again, highly successful, helping organizations and governments come back to some level of normalcy in the post COVID world. So we work with our partners. We specialize in digital transformation of a specific industry or a sub industry. So we've looked at how behavior is changing in our target industry. We've looked at how do financial advisors work now. In the past, if you are familiar with our industry, financial advisory world is filled with relatively non-tech savvy players. We also have baby boomers that do not adopt technology very easily. So it's an industry filled with white glove treatment, but it's all in person touch. Now all of a sudden you're impacted because you're moving to a virtual world, but you still have to collaborate with your clients as a financial advisor. You still need to maintain the level of relationship. You still need to maintain the level of productivity that you have to. So coming up with intuitive solutions to maintain and elevate advisor productivity, to facilitate a seamless financial advisor investor collaboration. And again, it's not something that can be done just by us. We partnered with companies that offer best in class features. You look at a DocuSign, which is an electronic signature solution, enables, let's say, a new account opening without two people being in the same place at the same time and signing on a piece of paper. We've looked at digitizing a lot of the paperwork that is required for such transactions. So we've taken all the possible tools that we have had, as well as our partners have had, the ecosystem has had, and we've elevated, we've enhanced our product capabilities to facilitate the solution to the challenges that the post-COVID world brings to our industry.
Yeah, and that's kind of innovation that many people don't think of. The thing that you need to invent the wheel, but actually when you combine existing technologies, you have a new innovation.
Absolutely. Apple did not invent touchscreen, right? Apple did not invent Gorilla Glass. But they put a lot of things together to create iPhone, which putting together the pieces, you don't have to be owning, you don't have to be building every piece of the puzzle, but as long as you can innovate with available technology and available pieces of innovation in a creative way, you will succeed.
Yeah. You mentioned agility. So how do you drive agile leadership or agile organization in Skience? What do you do?
There are a lot of components that go into how an organization can execute things in an agile fashion. First of all, innovation is not the responsibility of one single individual in an organization, whether you're the CEO or COO or CTO, whoever. I think it's a team-based approach. People have ideas. It should not be one person's idea. It has to be a collaboration between multiple people. That's how you improve upon an idea, you refine an idea, you think about how to bring that idea to market. We collaborate within our organization. One person might have an idea, but we make sure that we discuss that, we refine it, we hone it, and get it to a place where we can actually execute and develop it. And also how we develop it, what's the time frame? Are we building everything ourselves, or are there pieces that we can embed in our product or our features? Again, going back to the previous topic, you don't have to invent every little thing. We look at all those options and then we execute per plan. So I think it's a culture of an organization. I'm not saying that we are perfect, but we have learned from our mistakes too, and we've attempted to improve with every cycle about innovation, about being agile in how we work. And it's not just about developing a product, it's about how we work as an organization. Agility applies to not just the product development part of our organization. It applies to how we recruit, how we find people, how we manage relationships, how we ensure client success. So it's more of a culture than something that applies to a siloed part of an organization.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's kind of it should be the new norm for companies that want to move fast in today's world.
Absolutely. I mean, you'll find so many examples of how successful companies like a Microsoft or an Amazon or, of course, Salesforce work in an agile fashion and come up with improvements, enhancements, and newer features and products so quickly. Again, it's a culture.
Yeah. So with offices around the world, especially with such kind of time zones gaps, how do you align your team around the world in a company? What is your secret sauce to align the multicultural, multinational, different continent teams?
It's a good question. It's something that not just our company, but a lot of other organizations face as a challenge. And I wouldn't say that we've perfected it. There is always room for improvement. Time zones, communication styles, communication differences, and sometimes cultural differences can play a negative role in the overall productivity of an organization. But again, a lot of companies before us have attempted to solve that problem or at least mitigate the risks. Luckily, some of the leaders that we've had in the organization have had prior experience in working for global firms where people had been trained on how to communicate and how to work. So we tried to leverage some of those best practices as we expanded organically across different regions of the world. One of the things that we've done, I think, quite well is identifying the strengths of each team. When you're looking at resources in the US, they may align very well with more of client interactions, one-on-one. I mean, obviously, pre-COVID, it used to be in person, and that communication used to be a lot more seamless compared to having somebody sit in 9-10 hours away in terms of time zone and having that communication over a phone call. But at the same time, there are teams that are extremely efficient in developing certain things if appropriate level of documentation is provided to them on what needs to be done. So we've tried to identify strengths of different teams and stick to those core strengths. And we've also learned from our mistakes. We've identified and understood the level of communication and the type of communication each team requires. Again, we may take certain things for granted with certain teams. Then realize after something goes wrong that you cannot take those things for granted. So next time you make sure that you communicate what is required a lot more in detail and not assume that the other person gets it. So yes, there have been such examples, but the underlying model is that we've identified strengths and we try to put teams in a position to win based on their strengths. We try to leverage teams for their strengths, not so much for their weaknesses. Yes, we do attempt to help them improve in areas of their weakness. We try to put teams in positions and in roles where they can succeed, where they can do what they're really good at.
Sanjeev, that was an insightful interview. Thank you so much for taking the time and share your wisdom and experience with the audience. And thank you for watching the show, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.